Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, people of all ages, welcome back to the Sticky Floors podcast. I am one of your hosts, CJ. I am joined by Mr. Will, and we are back. And today we are talking about the movie The Bike Riders. So, The Bike Riders is actually in theaters right now. So, this is going to be a spoiler heavy review. So,
Definitely.
if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it and then come back and then listen to this. Or you can listen to this to decide if you want to go and watch it. So, you can either way come back and watch this. That's the point. That's the point. And when you come back and watch it, make sure you like, subscribe, and share for this because that's what's really
Yes,
important.
sir.
So anyway, so yeah, so let's get into it. This is going to be a good one to talk about. I know in the pre-production we talked a lot about some of the themes in this, and we got a lot to jump into. I'm going to pass it over to my man, Mr. Will, to get this journey started for us.
Appreciate that, fam. Yeah, CJ had mentioned that this movie here has a lot of substance. There's a lot of meat to the proverbial bone, and I also would like the audience to bear in mind that this is part of, I guess you could say, not only a recent series that we've been doing about more current movies that are presently out in the theaters, but I think it also
Mm-hmm.
ties into an overall arcing theme from last month to this month, which is the importance of male role models, men in the household. What is masculinity from the point of view of different individuals, different periods, time periods, that is, and also different social economic backgrounds. So just keep that in mind, and it'll help
Yeah,
you.
that's all. That's all through this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I think that would help the audience and the viewers to make a definitive choice whether or not they want to see the movie or not. But remember, check us out, and then you can worry about all that other stuff later on.
Right. Right.
That's the key.
Right. No matter what, check
Yeah,
this
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. Uh, the Bike Riders is a gripping tale that delves into themes of masculinity, hypergamy, loyalty, respect, and the dominance that has shifted in one's perspective. It chronicles the evolution of the Vandals motorcycle club, led by the steadfast yet enigmatic Johnny, brought to life by Tom Hardy. Over a transformative decade based on Danny Lyon's book, which sprang from his deep infiltration into Midwest biker clubs from the 1965 time era to 1973. The film not only does so many things, but more importantly, it keys upon humanizing them and normalizing bikers. It pulls back the curtain on their rugged world, the world that they had grown up in from a bygone era. The story takes a pivotal turn when the headstrong Kathy, portrayed by Jodie Comer, encounters Benny, played by Austin Butler, at a local biker club.
There it is. Yeah, this is like a period
Yeah.
piece. And you mentioned it in your opening discussion that there's this idea of like kind of which direction is masculinity going to
Hmm.
go, and it plays out in this movie, and it's definitely encapsulated in the characters as well. So whenever we get into a subject of like manhood in movies, it's like that's getting into our wheelhouse. You know what I'm saying? So I know we got a lot for this stuff, this one. I'm just gonna kick it off by saying that there is a lot about this movie that I really liked, um, even though there's some things about it that I didn't. And a lot of what I really liked is the way I think it just tapped into some visceral elements of like just manhood and masculinity.
Okay.
And the first thing that I want to just bring up is just the idea of like what the Vandals is. So the Vandals, as you mentioned, is like a biker group that started, right? Biker club
Yeah.
actually. So I think like in the beginning, and especially like how the movie was marketed, it was almost marketed like they were a biker gang, right? Which is
Yeah.
not actually what the Vandals is in the beginning, although it kind of becomes that in the end. But like in the beginning, what you have is Johnny, once again played by Tom Hardy, who has this idea of like, yo, I love bikes, I love racing bikes. There's got to be other men out here who like that, who do that too. Let's get together and just have fun,
Hmm.
right? And just have that camaraderie and that brotherhood. And I think like that's an important point about the movie is that these clubs were important to men of that time because they were helpful in creating a space for men to be around men and to discuss their lives in the presence of other men and get feedback from other men. And one of the things that when you look at like the 60s and 70s and even the 50s, like there were more things like that. Like even when you watch like sitcoms from back in the day, you'll see like there used to be like there's always an episode where somebody was going to bowling night because the men were a part of bowling leagues, right? Or like there was a poker night, so the men were getting together and playing poker and things like that. And so one of the major themes I think of this movie is this idea of men needing to have their own space that they create for themselves and with themselves to just kind of be amongst other men and just kind of have that experience.
You know, it's really I don't want to say funny, haha, but funny, peculiar that you would mention the two important figures. Not because that's they're the main characters, but because they're the driving force behind the movie's overall arcing theme of where does life take you, what directions do you want to head to as a man in the United States
Mm-hmm.
during the late 50s all the way to the early 70s, not even mid 70s, I'd say mid 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is it's almost like a changing of the guard. These
Yes. Yep.
individuals are coming out of World War II, and let's face it, these individuals who were born in that generation are called the good generation, or the
Mhm.
great generation,
The greatest generation,
and
right? Yeah.
you know they had literally seen a lot of transformation themselves, and now they were key elements, a part of that. And the transformation I'm speaking to is cultural norms, way society thought of men and women with their distinct and
Hmm.
definitive roles as, okay, you go to work, you stay home, you take care of the kids, you do the household chores, etc., etc. The man will, he'll be the quote unquote proverbial breadwinner, but he'll also come home,
Hmm.
take out the garbage, mow the lawn, etc., etc. Having those clubs that CJ mentions, those hobbies, those outings that are strictly for and by men, um, I can't say that they were created out of necessity. It was almost as if they were created like you having two arms and two legs. Like it was just something
Mm.
that it was just a,
A
yeah,
normal
yeah,
process. Yeah.
definitely. And also just want to add this little tidbit too. They're a band of brothers. That camaraderie that you have when you're fighting and you can and you do kill individuals. It brings about a sense of closeness. So you may not believe in the reason why you're fighting, but you're fighting for the person to your left and your right. Now, when you come back home and the women are no longer in the factories, so you have, I think her name is um, uh, you have the lady with the handkerchief on her head. I think it's like Rivet Reddy or something like that, or Betty, whatever. Nonetheless, the caricature that you have during World War II,
Oh yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
know what you meant. Yep, I know what you're talking about.
and Uncle Sam, etc. So the ladies are going back home, and they're also like, hey, what's going on? I liked being out of the house. I liked having my own money. I liked having a sense of purpose for something bigger than just my own home. So both of these two sexes, generations, individuals are almost like thrown out of whack, if you will. They've upset the balance. So these biker clubs, they come out, and of course you're going to see their families. It's not like they're trying to be criminals or anything. It's
Yes.
more
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Great
yeah,
point.
it's more
Great
like,
point. Yeah.
hey, we're going to go have dinner, or a late night get together. That would be the equivalent for
Hmm.
them. So they're going to bring a couple of sandwiches and baskets and things of that ilk, and you're going to see these guys watching their kids grow up in that same environment, and then they go on to want to ride bikes.
Yeah, that's a great point too about the idea of the family being incorporated into that, because that's the thing. When the biker groups were getting together, they brought their
Mm-hmm.
wives with them, like the wives and the girlfriends and whatever were with them in that part of the club too. And that's also like interesting how, when you think back to the television shows that we watched growing up, I'm talking about people in our
Mm-hmm.
generation, I do remember like Leave It to Beaver. I do remember like the idea, like you said, of the dad goes out to
Mm-hmm.
work, the mother is home, the dad comes home, does all these things. There was this constant kind of reinforcement of a certain sort of social
Mm-hmm.
norm. And then I think what you start to see in the 50s and 60s and 70s is a disruption in those
Mm-hmm.
social norms. And now it's like, okay, well, what are men going to do? How do men find their space when everything is kind of changing? Because it used to be that if you were a man, you went to work, everybody was with man.
Mm-hmm.
So being at work could have been the man space. Now things have changed for that. And I'm not suggesting that that's a bad
Mm-hmm.
thing, but it's a real thing and it's a real difference. So then it almost, I think it pushed men to, as you said, like naturally
Mm-hmm.
recreate those groups and spaces where it was just going to be men together doing whatever it is that men want to do. And that doesn't mean that it's something bad,
Right.
right? It can be risky, and it can be fun. But I think men and boys have always associated fun with risk a little bit. Like you remember like being young and like who can jump down the most flight of steps. Like who can run across the street before the car comes. Like these are like crazy games that we played that you do because I think like what boys and men understand, and sometimes girls and women have to learn, is that men have to be a little bit risky. That's the juice. The risk is the juice for us. And I think like that's why the idea of like the biker club and the racing and even the fist fighting and stuff like that, it works for this group.
Not just that, man. I think that both genders are attracted to that, and what I mean by that is
Mm,
males in particular, they like the thrill, the adrenaline rush because it's just part of their chemistry. It's the reason why you play dangerous sports. You and I both played football. You and I both played basketball. Uh, you and I both played baseball. Like you engage in a lot of sports because you want that rush and you have the
yeah.
camaraderie of individuals next to you. Now, yes, there are those who play individualized sports such as tennis, golf, things of
Hmm.
that ilk. But again, it's still the competition, pushing yourself,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And who gets most of the girls at the time? Jocks. So at the same
Yeah. The
token, yeah.
athletes, no
So at the
doubt.
same time, females are attracted to that too because on display are the masculine traits of bigger muscles, speed, stamina, height. Like these things tend to attract other individuals. I read this crazy stat. I'm pretty sure you read it too, where better looking, more attractive, quote unquote, even though that's a subjective term. Individuals make more money. Taller people make
Oh,
more money.
absolutely.
So therefore,
Absolutely. Yeah.
this experience of the bikers, it exudes that. What's the first thing that you see is I forget the gentleman's name, um, who unfortunately has the untimely demise, but he brings his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is Asian. At the same token,
Yeah.
Johnny
Yeah.
has his wife. At the same token, you're introduced to Benny because Kathy's coming to give her girlfriend, loan her some money because she was stranded,
Yeah.
and she's surrounded by other guys. And then you see all these guys coming in, they see her, and they're like, oh, who's that? And they automatically flock to her because she's the
Yeah.
antithesis of what they've normally been accustomed to, and because she's an attractive female. So these things bring
Yeah.
out the things in these guys. And since we're on this real quick, I wanted to mention, it's funny, the character Benny, his name means benefactor, meaning blessed, and it also
Mm,
means son of the right hand. So John, as we all know, John the Apostle, it's another biblical
yeah.
term. So it's not coincidental that
Yeah.
these two fit like a hand in glove, and that Benny is John's right hand man, and he looks to him to cover him. And nothing says that more in the scene where, which is one of my favorite scenes. I know I'm skipping ahead, but it just seems to be on par. Where Benny's just runs right in, and he's as he sees Johnny
Oh
talking,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's
Arguing with the
yeah, and
guy.
he's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Why'd you do that?" And he's like, "I seen you squaring up, so there was nothing else to say." That's the thing that
Yeah.
females are attracted to, that sense of danger, adventure, take charge, assertiveness, aggressiveness
Yeah.
in a controlled environment. I'm not saying all the time, et cetera, obviously. But in certain circumstances, when that happens, it's like, oh, he was fighting over me. Oh,
Hmm.
he gets so riled up when this happens. Oh, I love a little bit of jealousy or craziness.
Well, I think like what's funny about the movie itself is when Kathy meets Benny, she's actually living with somebody else.
Dude,
She's actually right. So Benny actually drives her home, right, on his bike, and then sits across the street essentially until her man
the
leaves, right? He just runs her man out of literally out of her life,
trifling.
right? And then she says, "I married him a week later." Right.
Like I said,
So, and it's funny when I was in the movie theater and I was watching it, when she said that, there was a collective like laugh from the audience, which is both made of men and women. And I think everybody kind of got it
mm-hmm.
in the sense that whoever that guy was she was with before Benny, he wasn't as high on the dominance hierarchy as Benny was for whatever the reason, right? It wasn't just, yeah, Benny's good looking, all that, but he's also assertive. He's also determined. He's also very clear about what he wants. And I think those are characteristics that people respond well to, that men want to be around and that women want to be around as well. And that attraction is different in different ways, but that's present in the movie as well.
Well, hence the phrase: guys wanted to be like him or be him, and
Yep.
females wanted to be around him
Want
or wanted him.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. But now speaking about the wanted thing, I think the other part about the movie that makes the group valuable, and I'm talking about the original version of the Vandals, is that it's also made of these men that have society has forgotten in some
Hmm.
way. Like you mentioned them coming home from the Vietnam War and not necessarily knowing, okay, where do I fit in into society now? And what am I supposed to do? And I've lived like I've been in a war situation. I've been with the band of brothers. How do I fit back into like regular society? So the biker group gives them that. It gives them that place where they can reintegrate themselves. And I think like different characters are sort of stand-ins for different
Hmm.
things. Michael Shannon's character like personifies that.
Mm.
Like the man who like he's kind of lost, but he's found himself within the group. And he I love the scenes where he's sitting around the fire just talking about like his experience, what happened with him, what happened with his brother, the way that people look at him versus the way they see his brother, and then the way that he sees other men as a result. And getting saying that in amongst a group of other men who get that and understand that and give him the space to share that way.
I think it's dope that you mentioned that too, because at this time, you're talking about counterculture versus the so-called norm, or those who have assimilated to such
Mm-hmm.
a degree. It's always been there, but this is to such a degree where you have I want to say what around 65. You have all these different interminglings. You got beatniks, you have hippies, you got the invasion
Yeah.
of the Beatles,
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
the civil rights
Yep.
movement. So you have all these things going on at the same time, and you're gonna have different ideas. You're gonna have a different way of being, and if you're not with the
Mm-hmm.
times, you will get passed by. You will become extinct, and I think you see that now with all these
Yeah.
individuals who were promised jobs such as coal mining and other blue collar jobs, and then they're not coming through. Well, that time has passed. Now you're in the age of AI and other computer. I mean, like most of the jobs you hear about now are talking about cybersecurity. So I just use that as
Yeah.
a backdrop to say, here are these individuals, as you touched upon, who are coming back from, at the time, World War II. Then you fast forward, then it's the Korean War. So they're still of the same ilk. They're still of the same generation where hey,
Yeah.
life was slower. Cars had carburetors still. There was no, electrical interface, no GPS. You had a physical map. There wasn't,
Yeah.
calling for Uber or anything like that. If you had a taxi, cool. Otherwise, you bum a ride. Like you could hitchhike still at that time, and it was very
Yeah.
common.
How about that? How
Yeah.
about Chuck?
So
Yeah.
I just think that
Yeah.
these dudes having a commonality and a sense of like belonging that you touched upon is really key, really key.
Yeah. And there's something when you just mentioned the part with the car, I know that one of the things we talked about, and I know you wanted to mention this, was like the symbology of driving the motorcycle
Yeah,
and like what the motorcycle itself means to like the idea of this version of manhood.
yeah, and that's part of the reason why I referenced technology, because you have these motorized, like a car is nothing more than a motorized carriage without horses,
Mhm.
and the same thing can be said of a bicycle. A bicycle, you use manpower, you're pedaling, etc., etc. Well, now you have this motorized bike. It's nothing more than
Mhm.
an engine strapped onto a bicycle. And at first, it
Mhm.
was like, ew, what is this? Like, what's going on here? And then after a while, it was more acceptable because you could see it had practical purposes. Easy to park, easy to maneuver. If you wanted just a single,
Yeah.
personalized individual on a motorized vehicle, hey, you had that. At the same token, too, though, there was this adrenaline rush, which again goes
Of
to these
course.
type of individuals who are coming back from the war. They got to sample a bicycle on the battlefield for whatever purposes, whether it be medical, dispersing bullets, or whatever have you. So you got these guys, they come back, they had already been used to riding motorcycles, and they figure, hey, we can race them now. We can go around dirt
Mhm.
roads, that thrill of the wind blowing in your hair and on your skin.
Yeah.
You're doing something, again, that's viewed as dangerous, something that's
Yeah.
reckless and radical, and hey, this is fun. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
attracts a certain element, to
Yeah.
that space.
And there's also the independence of having built it
Oh yeah,
yourself.
definitely.
So, like everyone, start off with a certain bike and then you put different things on
Mhm.
it. And it's like you make it into something different, right? But you made it, you souped it up to that point. And even like that one character, the
Mhm.
kid, like that they call the kid, like even he has a sense of pride about building a bike that he could ride. So there's also like that part of it, and it's fun. Like, have you ever ridden a
No,
motorcycle? You ever rode a motorcycle?
that's the thing too. I hate bikes. I hate them with a passion. I hate anybody who rides a bike. I see no purpose for it. But I understand. But I understand the thrill of it. But I guess it's because
Okay.
I've seen too many people, unfortunately,
Get
get
hurt.
maimed or worse, and a
Yeah.
lot of graphic stuff that I won't go into detail. But I've seen individuals lose assorted parts on their body and not make it, like
Yeah.
live. So I don't mess with bikes. Like I've seen grotesque things on a bike.
Yeah. I've seen. Yeah. I've. It's funny. Like, I was thinking about this. There's like so many. What I appreciate. Another thing I appreciate about the movie. There's like scenes where it's just all of them on the
Yeah, yeah,
bikes, just
yep, yep.
riding, right? And sometimes I see that when I'm driving. I
Oh
might be
yeah.
driving in the car or whatever, and I'll see like a biker group pass by me, right? And I always think, I that's kind of cool. I always think like the idea of like, a group of dudes together all wearing the same kind of
Mm-hmm.
jacket. So there's like a team affiliation with it. Just, you don't know where they're going or what they're doing, but I like the sense of them doing it
No,
together. And even
synchronicity. I like. I can
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. And even when the guy, and sometimes, I know you've seen this too, you're on the highway and people just zoom past
Mm-hmm.
you. And I always think, oh, that's so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I always think, and there's a little part of me that always says, I bet that's fun though.
Oh,
I always have both of those experiences with it. So I just think about that when I think about like the attraction or the allure of like the
no,
motorcycle.
dude. Those things can be true simultaneously, and I get it. I'll be in traffic, and a dude. Matter of fact, I was just coming back off of a trip, and this guy's bobbing and weaving. I could see him a mile back, and he eventually got close to me, and he's riding literally the median, and I'm like, it
Yeah,
just takes for me to move over a little bit to get startled or anyone else, and he's done. He's road
yeah,
rash. Like he's 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 literally on the pavement, like just crumbled up somewhere under a tree. And so I
yeah,
hate having to be more sensitive to driving because of the recklessness of individuals on a bike, and that's the other thing. And then simultaneously, I also understand the appeal because you don't want to sit in traffic. You want to bob and weave, get to where
yeah,
you want to go. And this is an easier
yeah,
way. You spend less money on gas. Like you said,
yeah,
you can customize it yourself. So there's a personal attachment they talk about in the movie where Johnny says, "Hey, look, I had a friend," and this is during the scene where one of the characters unfortunately gets uh, he loses his life on a bike because of cars backing out. And I've had that happen to personal in personal family members and friends. That was redundant, but family and friends where unfortunately they lost their life because of someone just backing out or pulling making a right hand turn, and unfortunately this person speeding up and gets hurt. Nonetheless, I digress. The point is that the guy he talks about they lost their soul, they lost their heart to the club because he unfortunately lost his life. And Johnny's telling the
hmm
story where he's like, yeah man, I had another buddy of mine who unfortunately passed, and his dad had his bike and they worked on it together, and I made a really
Oh
good
yeah, yeah. I
offer
remember that
and
part.
he
Yeah, yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
sell it,
yeah,
and it's in his
yeah,
basement.
yeah, yeah. That's a
And
good
he's
part.
talking about like all the things that went into the
hmm
bike of how he would have put it to use, but it's just in the
hmm
basement collecting dust. That personal attachment, that sentiment, that sentimental feeling behind it because they worked on it together, whether the father endorsed it, liked the bike or anything, it reminded him of his son. He could still have a piece of his son with him. I get that, and I can appreciate that
Yeah,
as a parent.
yeah. I was thinking about a couple of things. I was thinking about that, just the metaphor of you in your
Mm-hmm.
car with your
Mm-hmm.
family stuck and seeing another man zoom by on a motorcycle because he's by himself. It's like, think about like just that idea of life, like all the things that you get slow you down. And not in a bad way. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I'm just saying, think about that. Like, you can't get through traffic in a minivan. You just can't do it, right? You're jammed up. The person on
Jammed
the
up.
motorcycle who, on a motorcycle, it might be you might have somebody on the back, maybe, but you can get through. Like, like, you want to go far, go with people. You want to go fast, go by yourself. It's an interesting little metaphor about that for like life and manhood, and just kind of how that works, man. But I know you had a couple more points about
Oh
masculinity
no,
as well.
dude! Oh, that's so hilarious. I think that ties into the points. Nice, excellent segue, CJ, of masculinity, of the freedom of expression with a bike, and this hive like-minded collective of outsiders and loners who are brought together. Oh man, that's brilliant. Yo, you're jammed up. You have minivan, and the minivan is the classic symbol of having a
That's
family, meaning
yeah,
a wife and
yeah.
kids and the dog,
That
maybe a
yeah.
friend.
You slowed down. You slowed
That's
down.
brilliant.
But like that minivan ain't going fast. It's
Oh,
not. It's not meant to.
it's so brilliant.
It's not meant to do that,
No, I
man.
get.
I mean, like we have friends. I mean, we have friends, right? That avoid getting minivans
Yeah.
because of
Yes. The
what it means to
stereotype.
have a
Yeah,
minivan.
man.
The stereotype. Like, just think about that. Like, no, like if you get a motorcycle, like if you were like, yo, I'm about to get a motorcycle, I'd be like, all right, that's dangerous, but I see, I get it. You know,
Yeah.
like when somebody's like, oh, I bought a minivan, you'd be like, oh, word. You're like, oh, okay. Does it have the door that kind of automatically closes? Like,
What you
it's
working with?
just,
Yeah, got the dual-sided doors that
yeah,
can open.
yeah. You got the little cameras and the
Yeah.
pictures, the
Oh man.
screens for the kids to watch.
And nothing was worse
It's
than the
tough.
minivan with the wood panels. Oh man.
Oh
Or
man, yeah, the Griswold joint,
Ooh.
the Griswold's joint, man.
Oh man.
And think about that. Think about like how in the National Lampoon's movies, you know, Clark Griswold, he's driving in the mini
And he
in
thinks
the
he can
station
pass somebody
wagon,
with
and
switch
he
up.
get but then he sees Christy Brinkley in the Ferrari drive up next to him. He like,
Man.
dog, I'm in this joint like that. Like even those little moments are like kind of just showing you how life kind of life comes at you fast and it changes
Man,
quick.
shout
You
out to
know,
the van drivers, the AT and BA brackets and the Scooby Doo
yo,
bunch. Fred whipping the mystery machine around, yo. There's plenty of famous vans out there in the world.
it is. But they weren't minivans though, and they had guns in
This
them
is
vans.
true. This is true.
Them vans was tough.
Yeah, they were.
But good
Yeah,
though,
they were.
good though, man.
Oh man, but I love the sense of camaraderie that these guys have. They personified anarchy, destabilization, disorderly conduct, but more of uh, uh, a rebel without a cause. Hence, you have
Hmm.
Marlon Brando and James Dean allegories being made throughout this movie. But at the same
Yep.
time, there's like this nostalgia, that these individuals are making peace, and you have the culture versus the U.S. at the same time, at odds with one another. You're dealing with a high point, if you will, in that period of when these guys are everywhere. CJ mentioned before, you're on the highway and you see all these bikes together. Well, that can be also
Yep.
intimidating, and that harkens to the point where these guys, like we mentioned earlier, they're loners. They've some of them have risked it all for the country, and they want to come back and still find their place, still be accepted by those that they risked it all for. Yet these
Yeah.
people are intimidated. They're in fear of them. You're introduced to Benny being told, "Hey, if you want to frequent this bar, you got to take off those colors." And
Yeah. You
he's
can't wear
like,
those colors.
nah, I'll die before I take these off. And literally, he almost does.
Yeah.
And then that sparks the retaliation by Johnny. They go to the bar. Not only do they burn the bar down, but Johnny says, "Oh, go find those guys who did this to him," and basically, put the fear of God in them, which I'm sure they do off screen. Um, and I think it's that sense of masculinity that's on display, where it's like, look, we don't let these things slide. We take action.
Yeah.
We protect ours, and we're very definitive in the choices we make. There's no wishy-washiness, and everyone gets their cue from Johnny and Benny. There's this point in the movie too where, and I'm pretty sure it's in part of the marketing and the trailers and such, where Johnny says, "Hey, we don't have to leave." His right hand man at the time, he's like, "Yo, we got to get out of here." Like, we made our point, and he's like, "Nah, we don't have to leave. We're not going anywhere. We're not afraid of them. They're afraid of us." And then in the
Yeah.
background, you see all the cops and the ambulance personnel behind, and even the townsfolk, and they don't say anything. There's no retaliation. There's no, "Hey, you guys, you shouldn't have did this." There's none of that,
Yeah.
and it's almost like the definitive statement as far as what the new norm is at that period of time.
Yeah. And there's also something about it. I'm gonna. This is a little bit of a stretch. What I'm about to say,
Mhm.
but that scene where they're sitting out there, they're all the vandals out there in front of
Mhm.
the burning bar, and the cops don't mess with them. it reminds it's a stretch. I know what I'm about to say, a stretch, but it reminds me of that scene in Malcolm X
Oh
when
no.
Malcolm is out there with all the Muslims
Mm-hmm.
in front of the police station,
Mm-hmm.
right? The message is the same.
Yes.
There's something that is intimidating
Mm-hmm.
about a group of men together and organized anywhere that makes everyone take a step back and be
Yep.
concerned, right? And you see that in America every day, all the time. Whenever there's a group of people, you see a group of men
Mm-hmm.
together, just anywhere, like neighborhoods. You see a group of black men standing
Mm-hmm.
together. What's going on over there? What they doing? Like you're attracted to it, and then some people are going to be afraid
Mm-hmm.
of it. Wherever you see that kind of especially with the presence of like organization and
Yeah.
structure, that is an inherent um, affront to the idea of government, because the government is essentially trying to control, and that group, once it develops, is creating its own sense of control, its own sense of order, its own sense of hierarchy. Because those guys in the Vandals, they're more loyal to Johnny than they are whoever was the president at that
Mm-hmm.
time, or whoever was the mayor of their city, or whoever was the police chief at that thing. And those other institutions and what they represent, they know that, and that's concerning.
Not only that, though, I think the other thing too is they operate outside of the law. They do the things that
Yep.
others wish that they could and would do,
Yeah.
and I think that scares people. They fear what they don't know.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these groups, and it showed like when Johnny says, "Yeah, we're going to get together and we're going to do it up big this time," and he's talking literally about them having a biker festival, which is part of the
Mhm.
origins of real life bike riders in the United States, where they had this biker festival, if you will, in a town that normally didn't accommodate this type of people. There was an incident, it got blown up. It's like playing telephone, and thus the so-called myth of the biker criminalization criminology
Mhm.
was born, all because of a miscommunication. Well, in the movie, it's a similar episode where these guys weren't doing anything. He was literally sitting at a bar, smoking a cigarette and drinking whatever it was he was drinking, some alcoholic beverage. He didn't have anybody around him. He wasn't infringing upon anyone else's rights or anything. He was by himself alone at the end of the bar. And these two grown men, who might have been even middle aged at the time, because one of them was balding pretty severely, and they tell him, like, hey, you got to get out of here, et cetera, et cetera. Going as far as hitting him in the head with a shovel.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
crazy.
it doesn't get any
Yeah,
worse
and then they
than,
broke his
yeah.
foot, almost chopped
Oh,
his foot off with the shovel too.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
who does that, man?
yeah. And Benny's journey in this movie is like Benny is like the young masculinity in
Mm-hmm.
transition, right? And the movie sets it up really, really very
Yeah.
obviously, of like this pull between, is he going to go with Kathy, as Kathy kind of moves away from, I want to be the motorcycle, I want to be with the motorcycle group, to like, oh, I want to have a
Mm-hmm.
family, I want to do this. Or is he going to go with Johnny, who wants to essentially hand the Vandals off to someone
Yeah.
else, someone who he knows is going to embody the same kind of principles of it, but also have the respect of the younger men who he knows are like a different breed than even what he's ready. Because Johnny is like he's like the older lion, like he's getting like he's like in almost an Obi-Wan
Yeah.
phase of his life now. He's older, like you see, like he's got the house, he's got the family. These are even things that Benny says, like you got a mortgage, you got this, like that. And for Benny almost views all of that as getting old or
Mm-hmm.
losing like the essential things that make him him. But for Johnny, he's like, yeah, but if you, I want to give this to you because I want you to run this and you can run it better than I can. Like that's going to elevate your masculinity where it is. And then you got Kathy who's saying the same thing in a different way. She's saying, I think you should elevate your masculinity by coming and being a father and a husband and a regular dude with a regular job.
See, and that's the part of the push and pull that I never really understood. One, um, if Johnny recognizes all these things within Benny, why doesn't he just try to do that himself? Like, if you see someone doing something that is appealing, why don't you try to incorporate that into your own essence and figure out a way that works uniquely and distinctly for you? Two, the thing that really bothers me is she knew him as the guy at the bar with these guys doing reckless stuff. So
Yeah.
why would she want to? And I never understood whenever I've heard females say, "I thought I could change him. I thought I could be the reason why he changed." Men, males, I should say, and females obviously have two different ways of viewing the world. I mean, that goes without saying. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's very distinct within this movie because it's told from the perspective of a female who has a different agenda than what these guys are about.
Yes.
She's
Mm-hmm.
introduced to them from a friend. So it's not even her
Mm-hmm.
stumbling upon them or, making acquaintances with one of them in a grocery store or whatever. And then he says, "Hey, come to this bar." And then that's it. And then all of a sudden she's amazed to find that, oh no, these are bikers. It's not. It's nothing along those lines. She met him as a guy who had no attachments whatsoever and was ready to go. And he would tell her, "Oh, I'm going to leave. Oh, you want me to leave?" And she even says, part of me even wanted him to leave. So, the
Yeah.
fact that she is now wanting him to go to Florida, get a job with her
Mm-hmm.
brother or his brother, I forget which one, and then, become domesticated rather. Sorry. It doesn't make any sense to me. I never understood that. Yeah, no,
Really?
I never.
That's like the story. I feel like that's the story of like 80% of men on
But that's my
Earth.
point. You met me on those terms, so why would you want to
Right,
change me?
right, but it's the story of 80% of the men on Earth. Like I think you meet people when you're single and you're young and everything is like fun and go out and hang out, whatever. Stay out all night, eat pizza, in the morning, whatever, that kind of stuff. And then there's a point where one person, one or two people, usually the woman feels like, okay, where is this thing gonna
That's
go?
different.
Like what happens after
No,
this?
that's
Like how do I know that there's some security here? And I think when that happens, it becomes a different conversation. And I think Kathy's conversation with Benny is like, really, and then she don't really have with Benny. She actually has it with Johnny. Her conversation with Johnny is like, I don't want him in this because I think he's gonna
Oh
get
no, she
killed
has a
or
similar.
he's gonna
She
get hurt.
does have the similar conversation with him.
And I want him to be in my life. I want him to be around, and I want him to be all the regular stuff. I want him to be a husband and a father and all those kinds of things, which is not wrong. But I don't think that that's unique. I think that happens to men every day. I think as we're doing the show, if somebody's getting that conversation right
Oh
now.
no, I'm not. I'm not saying as a whole it's not. It's uncommon. I mean, like in the biker setting in this world where these
Okay, so you're saying in
in
that
this
world where she should
yeah,
she should play. I got
and
you. I
and
got
at
you. I
the
see what
same
you're saying.
token, it's
I see what
like,
you're saying now.
hey, why would you want to
I see
change
what
me
you're
when
saying.
that's the very thing that attracted you
Yeah,
to me?
I see what you're
And
saying now.
simultaneously, I'm looking at it like, um, and I have this discussion with a plethora of people. Men, males are driven by the fact that they wish to provide for others. Those others could be a mother, father, whatever have you, like being the eldest son, or it could be, yeah, I have a wife and I have children, and I have a responsibility, and they make me want to be a better man. They make me want to get up in the morning, not because they put a gun to my head or anything like that, but they are my inspiration. I love providing for them. I love to see the smile that comes upon their face when I've given them whatever. Insert gift here as a token of affection. Insert, the ability to go on a trip or whatever. You know what I mean? Whatever that thing is that not only revitalizes them, but is also the fuel that invigorates the wife to say, "Oh, I love you. My man's thinking of me. He upgraded my wedding ring to X. It's a bigger carat ring." Or, "Hey, my dad got me my first car." You know what I mean? Whatever it is, but you feel that sense of pride and joy. Like, I did this for my
Yeah,
family, and I am the spear. I'm the tip of the spear. I'm the blade that gets everything done. That is the part where I say is in conflict with the bikers as a whole, and why I can't understand that dynamic in there. Like Brucey, who's
yeah.
the like I said, Brucey, who's the heart of it. He has a girl. They ain't got no kids or anything like that, and even his family
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
doesn't even.
she bought into the
Yeah,
lifestyle.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I get that. I get that. Yeah. I think that's a good point. I don't think Kathy does not buy
Mm-hmm.
into the
Yeah,
lifestyle, which is why she puts that pressure on. So I get that. All right. Good points. Yo, let's move on to the cake, man. Let's
yeah,
move
yeah,
into the
yeah.
cake and into the hate. All right, so cake wise, I got a couple things. Um, that just are a part of the movie. One, I love the challenge scene. I love that the Vandals create like a system where if you have a challenge with what Johnny says, you can either fight him, and they can either fight with hands or with
Mhm.
knives. Like it's like it makes perfect sense.
Arcade.
And yeah, but it's like, but here's the thing, man. When you were young, you grew up, whatever. You fought your friends. At some point in time, you had a fight with your friends, right? You might have a fist fight. But there were people like we grew up just you would fight people in your neighborhood, and then you become friends
Mhm.
afterwards, right? And the thing is that when he has that first moment with that guy, and he says, "All right, what's it gonna be, fists or knives?" And the guy's like, "Well, it's gonna be fists
I don't
because
want to kill
I
you.
don't want to kill
Yeah.
you," right? So it's like they have a disagreement, but at the same time they have a
Hmm.
respect. And I like that in the course of the thing. And I think like that's an essential part of groups of men and how men deal with conflict. There is a physical nature to conflict between men, and that's okay. And it's not like a make or break. It doesn't have to end in death. But I like the fact that Johnny in that scene is like, I had to fight him because they have to know that I'm the person that makes the idea. So you can't come with an idea. I have to have the idea, which is Johnny basically saying, I run
Hmm.
this, and this is how. So I like that. I like that part. Um, Other things I liked. I told us in the beginning with Michael Shannon. I love the guys just sitting around the fire talking about like their different lives and everything. I like how the one guy came from California and he was there to actually beat the other guy up, but then he's like, but now I like hanging out with y'all, so we're good. Like I liked that scene. Like we've been camping before. Some of the best conversations you have is as a group of men sitting around a fire just talking. So I loved that part. And then the last thing that I liked was the idea of like, and you mentioned it like moving into like showing that clip from the movie,
Wild
and the
ones.
guy's saying, yeah, the wild ones, and the guy's like, well, what are you rebelling against? And he's like, what you got?
Hmm.
Like just like that spirit of that rebel spirit that's just inside the Vandals and inside people and inside I think all of us in some ways, which is why we always like resonate with like the idea of the revolutionary or the revolution or the rebellion. Like we love those
Hmm.
ideas because I think that inside of us is constantly pushing to like, I feel constricted. What's freedom? Freedom comes with the rebellion or the revolution. So that's my cake for
And working backwards, I think the fact that the appeal then is we root for the bad guy because the bad guy is willing to stand up for his or her beliefs and say, no, I'm not going along with this. I'm not talking about evil. I'm talking about bad meaning bad. I mean, excuse me, bad meaning good, not bad meaning bad, to
bad
paraphrase
meaning
Run
good.
DMC.
Like
But
the Michael Jackson
yeah,
bad, the
you know
Michael
what I
Jackson
mean?
version of
So
bad.
that edginess, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the appeal. Uh, Norman Reedus is who you're talking about. Is funny. It says Funny Sonny, the guy from California.
Yeah,
He
yeah, I
always
like that.
plays a dude on a bike. There's been talk about him being
Okay. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.
went from fighting it out to all of a sudden to guns being introduced. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
the foreshadowing is the kid who again is nameless for a reason goes up to Johnny and says, like, yo, I'm a member of the Vandals now. I even got my own chapter, and now I'm here to challenge
Mm-hmm.
you. And he's like, all right, man, what do you want to do? Now Johnny, being naive and from the old school era, he gives him the option of like knives or fists. And he's thinking like, yo, if I cut him up, he'll back down, whatever, whatever. I've already whipped on him before. Nah, this kid, as soon as I saw him reaching, I was like, no one sees this. No one sees this.
Yeah.
This kid brought a
Yeah.
gun to a
Wait,
knife
wait. You
fight.
getting into the hate. You getting into the hate.
Nonetheless, I just say that to say the criminality aspect started then because you had these guys from Vietnam who were using heroin as a means of
Mm-hmm.
coping with the PTSD that they saw in the jungles of
Of
Vietnam,
course.
and it brought in a different element, which then leads to Kathy being mistaken for the girl in the red dress because she has the red dress, and now she almost gets raped, and now these guys don't understand that. So that clash is part of the things that I liked about the movie, where it did show a little bit of like, oh, okay, there's a transition, but I didn't and I'll get to other reasons why, as to why I felt that it was pretty empty in certain aspects too. I did like the fact that you got this club where they honestly and earnestly want to be a part of a evolution of what it means to be a man, and then in turn it leads to the revolution, which is, oh, masculinity is, like CJ mentioned, being around with other men and being open and
Hmm.
honest about what it is that you see in yourself as well as others. What it is that you bring to the table, your perspective, your ideas, and being earnest and heartfelt. um, I think that leads to another thing that I liked. I am a big admirer of Tom Hardy and his ability to
Hmm.
transition into the role. He became Bane to the point where you thought he was Bane. He became, in this case, Johnny, and he was very much of a very outspoken,
Yeah,
extroverted
he was
leader,
good.
very demonstrative, and I could appreciate that. But as always, I am really impressed with Michael Shannon. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's your
Yeah, I
dude, man.
slept on him for a
You
while
really
though.
like him as an
Yeah, I
actor.
slept on him though. But now seeing him in these different roles, I'm like, oh, okay. Because when I was watching,
Yeah.
I forget the joint when he was playing Johnny Cash, with I forget the actress's name. It's like I forget the movie. It's like about a country singer, so it's an autobiography. I mean, excuse me, a biography. I was a little like, okay. But now seeing him like full throttle in different shows and different movies, and like, oh, okay, I'm really impressed. And so him talking as Zipco and calling people pinkos, and
Mhm.
his resentment
Yeah, I like
of
that.
not
I
being
like
in
that. The
college,
Pinkos.
and him even shedding a tear almost as to why he wanted to fight for the U.S. and him being rejected, and that's what his soliloquy is about: the rejection of manhood, the rejection of the individual, the rejection of the
Hmm.
so-called loner, and not having a collective or a sense of belonging. So him getting with these guys, that is so dope, so dope.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then my last thing is just the cultivation of one's resolve. You're forging ahead and you're making it your own. So whether it be customization of bike, or
Hmm.
uh, Benny, running through town on his bike and the adrenaline. And the ironic part is they wouldn't have caught him if he didn't run out of gas. And then he plays it off so smooth where he gets off the bike, he starts smoking a cigarette, almost like he flipped it to be like not taunting, but almost like, yo, I could have got away, right? Like, I allowed you to catch me. I think him going
Yeah.
out on his own terms is really what we're talking about. Like, he's declaring and exposing himself as, yo, I'm here. I'm a force of nature. You can't stop me. I'm inevitable.
Yeah. I want to just highlight one thing you said about Tom
Yeah.
Hardy. I really like Tom Hardy in this movie also as well. And I like him in a lot of things. And I think part of what really helps with Tom Hardy as an actor is he's got a lot of
Hmm.
range, but he also always maintains a certain level of
Yeah.
physicality to him. So you buy him as someone who is tough enough to start and run the
Hmm.
Vandals. And you buy him as somebody who's tough enough to say to somebody, knives or
Yeah.
fists, and it really matters. It's like he just always has like a kind of physicality from him that, you've seen it, like you said, in the Dark Knight Rises. You saw it in Warrior. You see it in like Inception. You see it in movies where he just kind of has that thing to him where you feel like he could be tough. Even in like the Venom movies where he's a little bit more
Mad
comedy, he
Max.
still feels like he could be. Yeah, he could. Right, he could be like a tough guy. So yeah, I like that. Great casting
Not
there.
just,
And I also what's his name, Aaron Butler as Benny. Like he's perfect for that role as Benny
I
too.
think the thing that goes unsaid about Tom Harding is he can rap too. That's the funny.
I didn't know
Nah,
that.
like legitimately, he's on this group. It's called Czarface. It's Inspector Deck, um, uh,
I have heard of
yeah,
that. I have heard of that. Yeah, yeah,
Esoteric, and
yeah.
7L.
Okay.
Like his name is Frankie something with a P or whatever. Nah, he's nice. So shout out to Tom Hardy. Yeah,
Really?
he truly is a man of all seasons. On his Leonardo da Vinci type joint, man. Like he gets busy. He gets busy.
Got
Yeah,
it.
he is a true
Got
man
it.
of the people.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. So things I didn't like. I'm gonna be quick on these
Yeah.
three. The first I would say is the pacing and maybe it's the marketing of the
Mm.
movie. So what originally drew me to want to go see this movie is like I think like they were saying like this is like the Godfather of biker films or
Right, right,
something
right,
like
right.
that. And I actually thought I was gonna watch sort of like that kind of almost creation of like a organization, maybe criminal organization kind of thing happening. Absolutely not what the movie is
No.
about, right? And it does sort of get there, but not in the way you think it is. So the way that it's marketed, I didn't actually like. I think if they would have just like told it as like a story of like masculinity and what does it mean to like be the outlaw, that would have still been
Hmm.
interesting to me. I just feel like there was some same given a different way. Also, the pacing, it just felt kind of slow in some parts. So that was one of the things I didn't like too much. I didn't like Kathy trying to be. I
Mm,
felt like there were times where Kathy was trying to be Benny's
yeah.
mom instead of his wife. We talked a little bit about that with the way she talks to Johnny and everything. That part I didn't really like that too much. And then I know we both talk about this Benny's death. I mean, not Johnny's death. The way that Johnny dies, I that was not. I felt like he deserved better.
Definitely.
I felt like he deserved a better ending than that.
I think the fact, and I'm going to work backwards, that we both are in alignment with is Johnny's death. I understand
Mm-hmm.
it's necessitated. It's necessary because it signifies the end of innocence and how a
Mm-hmm.
dream can now become a scourge and then eventually a nightmare. So I get that, and I even understand that it had to be the kid in order to do that because now it's
Mm-hmm.
talking about the changing of the guard, the implementation of a new mentality, loss of sentiment. You know, just all the things that go along with once you had this utopian society, if you will, this, like I said, a halcyon where you have a bygone era that has been epitomized in throughout American culture, and now all of a sudden it becomes the worst thing since spinach. I hate spinach, but
The worst thing since
so
spinach.
I get that, but literally Johnny has this look on his face, like how could this happen? Or why is this
Mm-hmm.
happening? And it was preceded by a conversation that he had with Kathy, and it was almost like he knew he was going to his doom. Like this could be the end. Hey, have you heard from Benny? Is Benny coming around?
Yeah,
Is there anything you want to tell me? No, everything is good. Hey, honey, do you need anything from the store? Yeah, get that for me.
yeah.
Like they think it's just another day at the office. He doesn't even disclose the fact, like, hey, I could die out here.
I'm going into a
Yeah, I'm
knife
going
fight.
to a
Yeah,
knife fight. Anything can happen. This might be the
yeah,
last time you see me. You want to say anything or none of that? So
yeah,
I'm not necessarily rocking with that, man. Um,
yeah.
I think some other things that I definitely hate about this movie are the narrow connection to the Vietnam. The viewer is left to infer a lot of the things that went on and transpired.
Mm.
And even though, like I did
That's a good point.
mention, there is a sense of like, hey, yo, these guys are rough. They're not like the other ones we're used to. They beat up what's his face because he's saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting."
I wanted to be a
Yeah,
cop. Yeah, I was thinking about being
but he
a
doesn't tell
cop.
them
Yeah,
he wants to be a cop. He just tells them, "Yo, I'm getting out of this." I thought he said, if I remember correctly. I
he did say he said I wanted to be like a beat cop or something. That's what
Oh,
made them
okay,
look at. Yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
He said
I
yeah, and then
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
remember
You
at
know
the
what?
end
Yeah,
when
yeah,
Kathy's
yeah,
like
yeah,
he actually
yeah. He
became the
actually
beat
became
cop.
a
Yeah,
beat cop,
yeah,
motor,
yeah,
like chips. And
yeah, 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 yeah.
and that's
Exactly
kind of
like chips.
ironic
Yes.
too, being that Eric Estrada and I forget his partner's name. They were like, oh wow, you can get on a bike and you could be a cop and fight law, and like this
Mm-hmm.
sense of like it was cool to do that. And then I think last but not least, I definitely I have a very strong disdain for the few scenes of Kathy and Benny or Johnny and his wife dealing with life as a married couple within a biker club that is now on the verge of being a criminal organization. How do they deal with each other? Johnny has kids. What do you do when you want to go on vacation? Hey, mom, dad, we're going to go to Disney World. Are we all hopping on bikes with the little cart joint out?
Yeah.
What are we doing here? And then with Benny and Kathy, like we talked about before, um, how do you have these conversations about wanting to move to Florida when this dude is sitting there telling you he's going to leave you at a moment's notice because of all these other things going on with the club?
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna that's gonna get into some
Yeah,
questions that I have about this. So that's those are good points. The way that Johnny dies, it reminds me of Al Pacino's character in Johnny Donnie
yeah, 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 yeah.
Brasco. Remember how like he kind of like leaves. He's talking to his wife. He's like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going out." Like
Like,
he knows he's not coming
just
back,
say it.
but she
Yeah,
doesn't know
just
it.
say it,
Yeah, she
man.
doesn't know it. Yeah, that's
And
interesting
it's
there.
funny
All
that
right.
the movie reminded me a little bit of Johnny Depp in Crybaby with that whole 50s thing. So
Yes,
that's why I'm like,
yes,
I mean, like,
yes. That's a good
because
reference
the
point.
thing
Yep.
is that Benny is what you call it, James Master from Zoe 101. So my kids and I
Yeah,
look at him as Zoe's boyfriend in the second,
yeah,
third season, fourth season. Can't look at him now as Elvis now becoming Benny the biker. Like,
yeah. And Fade Rotha.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just,
And Fade Rotha. He kills that
yeah,
role too, by the
it's
way.
just weird, man.
Shout out to that. Yes. All right, let's get into some questions, man. All right, I got a couple for you. The first one, it kind of deals with something we've been talking about. So the movie is really told from Kathy's
Hmm.
perspective. Is the movie better if it had been told from either Johnny or Benny's perspective?
Definitely. Or if it would have been told from the interviewer himself, Lion.
Ah, okay,
So like
okay,
he gathers his information from her, but he's telling it a la I forget the movie where the kid goes on tour with the rock band or whatever have you. Like, so yeah,
almost
almost
famous.
famous. So like something like
Hmm.
that. You know what I mean? Like him, but definitely from the eyes of Benny or Johnny would have been ill. Like, hey,
Yeah,
this is where I'm going
yeah,
on, this is what I do, et cetera, et cetera. This is what I'm about. These are the conflicts I come into play. Yeah, definitely better.
yeah. It also would have, I think, given a different perspective as to
Yeah,
why things work
yeah.
a certain way. Because Kathy's a little bit removed, so like her
Oh
perspective is
yeah.
going to be influenced by that. All right, so we mentioned the part with Kathy and the red dress. I just want to, when I was watching it, I had this thought I want to ask
Hmm.
you about it. When Kathy was given the red dress, was that a setup to put her in a situation where she could be assaulted?
I think that's the cynical part of you. Like, yo, there's some evil,
Thank you for
evil
saying.
part. You know, what I mean? Like
Thank you.
not you. I'm saying the guys have this evil part in them. I'm saying that these guys have this evil part in
I
them, and
got
they're
you. I
like,
know. I
yo,
know.
let's get her. Nah, I think the fact is you're not having this communication between all of them, and I think that's the part that they're trying to hone in on. That the lack of communication, the lack of familiarity, the lack of closeness, all of these strangers that now all of a sudden they're part of their movement, and thus the reason why the club has lost its luster, lost its connected, their cohesiveness, and the ability to connect with one another so easily and readily.
Got it. Got it. All right. I got one more question for
Shoot.
you. So this is so, and I'm just going to set it up by saying this. This is the first. We've covered a couple movies on the show that were in theaters at the time. So we talked about like Equalizer. We did the Marvels, Civil War, Monkey Man, things that were in theaters when watching it. This is the first one that I thought about. I wonder if I would look at this differently 5 years from now, if I had not seen, if I didn't have to, if I wasn't talking about it when I saw it. So my question for you is this: do you think that how you look at this movie would be different 5 years from now? And if so, what do you think might change?
Um, it's a good question. When you initially asked, I had a definitive answer. Now I'm not so sure. The reason why I say that is this: in 5 years from now, we don't know where technology is going to take us and thus our place in the world, and us being like these guys, longing for the past to be what it was.
Good
Um,
point. Good point.
at the
Yeah.
same token, I'm like, we try to. I think as a collective, our group, our friends, try to embrace technology and utilize it for our benefit as best as we know how at that time. For those that don't know, CJ does a lot of the producing, and he was not familiar with any of the technology and the software that we utilize. But as you can see, through his brilliance and perseverance, we have a very seamless show. So kudos to him. And I think in 5 years, will I be like that? Where I'm like, yo, I can see where this is going, and now the things that I liked, I didn't, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure. I'm
Not
not
sure.
sure.
Okay. That's a good question.
Yeah.
All right. That's my questions.
All right. I'm rocking with this, man. Um, why are people fascinated with the bad boy?
Mm. Okay. So this is a theme, and you mentioned it in the very
Yeah.
beginning when you talked about just the themes in the movie. I think and I think what it is although we like to follow the
Hmm.
rules in general, I think as people, we come into life not following
Mm.
rules. Like as a child, you don't want to
Hmm.
listen. You don't want to do what you're supposed to. You don't want to eat the vegetables. You don't want to go to bed on time. And it's like you get older and you suppress that part of
Mm,
you, but you always know that that was a part of you. And some of us, as we get older, we don't really suppress that as
mm,
much. And I think there's something about that that's attractive because it reminds us of the time when we were also against that, the time when we were also raging against whatever. Like he says, what are we rebelling against? What you
right.
got? Like that's how kids are, right? And we start off that way, and then as we get older, we kind of lose some of that, and then we see different people who didn't give up on it as
Mm.
much, and it reminds us of something familiar to us that we like actually. And I think that's why we like the outlaw, the gangster, the mob, the person, the mafia,
Yeah.
the bike rider, whatever the case may be. We like the
Hmm.
villain, like we like them because they're they're against the grain, and we remember being that way.
I like that answer. That's tough right there. Um, in that same vein, then, um, is there disdain for being nice? If so, why?
I mean, like, think about the way when you say like being nice, right? You almost can't help but say nice guys finish
Hmm.
last, right? So we've always been taught that being nice equates to being weak or
Right.
losing. So no one wants to be weak and no one wants to
Hmm.
lose. So if you're nice, then if that's what that equals, why would anybody want that? Right? It's all like for some people being like if somebody says, "Yo, you're a nice man," that's like an
Hmm.
insult. It sounds like an
Crazy.
insult, which is crazy, right? But that's think about the programming that's gone along with that, right? So that's what I think it is like how could nice, the word nice in and of itself, be a negative thing?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure.
But we've turned it into that. I think like society has turned it into a negative, so that when a person is not nice, now all of a sudden you have respect for that person or people like that. Like there's public figures now in the world who are
Mm.
jerks, right? They're not nice, but people love them because they're not nice, right? So just bad social programming.
Well, well, that's my next. Well, that's part of the next part of my question. Then is Kathy refers to the guys as losers or candy, and she talks
Yeah.
about how Benny is like a man's man because he doesn't cry, and then the only time she's seen him close to crying is when his foot was almost severed, and then she even goes on and well, not so many words, but you see him crying when he hears about the death of Johnny and how she can
Mhm.
almost respect that, but if he were crying under other circumstances, she would. I say that to say this: does society glorify antisocial behavior and misfits? If so, why? If not, why?
It absolutely does glorify that because the idea of like the misfit or the outlaw, if it can be framed the right
Mm-hmm.
way, it gives people something to view as the bad guy. It's actually like Tony Montana and Scarface
The
telling
last
you,
time you can see the bad guy.
this is the last time you're gonna see the bad guy, right? If you can say that person is wrong, that person is bad, that person is evil, it allows you to say, I'm
Mm.
good. I'm right.
Ah.
And the society needs that person, whether they earned it or
Mhm.
not. They need that person to say that about, to make them into that thing. One person's revolutionary is another person's criminal.
Mm.
It just depends on the side of it that you're on. But the ability to shape the perspective and the perceptive of who's the villain and who's the revolutionary, that's the society, that's the media, that's
Ah.
all those things, can to say, oh, this person is the freedom fighter and this person is the criminal. Well, how do you know
Yeah,
that?
one
So
person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. So it just depends on how
that's
you look at
there it is. Exactly. It just depends on how you look at it.
it.
Yeah. And you see that
Yeah.
every
Oh,
day. You turn on television, that message is being
no,
sent.
definitely, man. Definitely.
All right, so we're into the popcorn. I'm not gonna. I've thought about this back and forth. We've talked about
Right.
this. This is an interesting. Like I would say, like this movie is like an attractive woman that I'm not attracted to. So like, it's like it's a good movie. It's good. I'm about to give it 4 boxes of popcorn. I think it's watchable. I think it's worth watching. I didn't love it, but it's good.
Mm.
Like I know it's good, I know it's good. Like it's like a good meal. Like you eat, like, oh man, it's good. I wouldn't necessarily have it again, but it was good. Like it's good. It's four. It's like a weird four. That's why I'm wondering, like 5 years from now, will I see it as a three or will I see it as a
Mm,
five? I don't know. Like that'll
that's
be
a
interesting to
unique
see. But
take. Okay.
I got it for four
I'm
boxes.
also in alignment. We got this simpatico going on over here. 4 boxes.
There it is.
Um, Similar to CJ, this is not a movie for me. I don't like bikes. I don't. I
Mhm.
don't wish to be a part of that culture, but I have an appreciation for what they stand for. I can understand why someone would gravitate to this particular arena based upon the
Yeah.
different characters from Brucey to Johnny, Benny, um, Zipco, basically saying why they did it without coming out and saying this is why I did it. So 4 boxes for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like in a weird space where it's like I get it, I understand it. Maybe it is like it being about a biker club. Maybe that's the part that just
Connect
doesn't
with you or resonate.
sit with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if it was something else, it would be like maybe it's a
Mhm.
five if it's a football
Yeah.
team. I don't know. Maybe it was something else, it would be a five. But as a that part of it, it just didn't hit for me like that way. But once again, we both give it four, so it's definitely a watch. It's definitely worth
No,
seeing.
definitely.
Um, to the themes, my brother.
Yeah. I definitely can appreciate lawlessness in a child where they don't know any better. And I can also
Mhm.
understand subversion in a child. Where I have problems now is with I guess that's part of the reason why I also have a disconnect with this movie. Um, the Bikers revolves around the intense and tumultuous journey of life within the microcosm of a biker's club. From birth to life, the narrative captures the struggle to survive within a brotherhood that values perseverance and enduring hardship. The decay and atrophy of both human spirit and physical health are evident as the film progresses, showcasing the entropy of life through the lens of the Chicago Vandals Club. The film explores masculinity in its rawest form, revealing the nuances of hypergamy, loyalty, and respect, yet also exposing the eventual dominance shift in perspective as the youthful vitality of its members wanes. The onset of
Yep.
the Vietnam War and its grim aftermath bring about a killing of dreams and a corruption of innocence as soldiers affected by PTSD return and intertwine with violent youth culture.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot into the tapestry of this movie. And that theme when you're talking about just all that, that's there. That's there. This has been a good one to talk about. I've enjoyed this one. Next week, for those that are coming back next week, which is everybody, we're gonna do a little we got something a little fun, a little more fun coming up. We're gonna do the Fall
Yeah.
Guy next week. So once again, the Sticky Floors podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify. We are on YouTube. We want you to like. We want you to subscribe. We want you to share because we want to grow this. And we can't do that without your assistance. We will see you next week. Peace.